Welcome, witches and wizards, to an extraordinary journey through one of the most fascinating family histories in the wizarding world. Today, we're delving deep into the enigmatic, brilliant, and sometimes tragic legacy of the Dumbledore family, from humble beginnings to magical greatness, scandals to sacrifices, and the shadows that haunted them across generations. I'm your guide through this magical mystery, so grab your butterbeers and settle in for the untold story of the Dumbledores. Every legendary family has its beginnings, and the Dumbledore saga starts here in the sleepy village of Mould-on-the-Wold in the West Country of England. Though the Dumbledores we know best lived in the late 19th and 20th centuries, the family name stretches back centuries in British wizarding history. The Dumbledores were never among the so-called Sacred 28 pure-blood families, but records show they maintained a respectable position in wizarding society for generations. The name Dumbledore itself has an interesting etymology. It's an Old English word for bumblebee. Legend has it that an early Dumbledore ancestor had a particular affinity for bees and could often be heard humming to himself while working, earning the nickname that eventually became the family surname. While not extraordinarily wealthy or politically powerful, the Dumbledores were known for producing witches and wizards of considerable magical talent, particularly in transfiguration and charm work. Family records indicate a strong tradition of Ravenclaw sorting at Hogwarts, though exceptions certainly existed throughout the generations. But our story truly begins to take shape in the mid-19th century with the birth of Percival Dumbledore in 1839. Percival was described as a kind, thoughtful wizard who excelled at defensive magic during his Hogwarts years. After completing his education, he settled in Mould-on-the-Wold, where he would eventually meet a beautiful witch named Kendra. Kendra was quite remarkable for her time, a talented witch born to Muggle parents. Despite the prejudice that existed against Muggle-borns in the 1800s, her exceptional magical abilities and dignified demeanor commanded respect. Proud and private by nature, Kendra graduated from Hogwarts with top marks in charms and potions. Percival and Kendra married in 1880, settling into what appeared to be an idyllic life in Mould-on-the-Wold. Within a year, they welcomed their first child, a son they named Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, born in 1881. The family grew quickly. In 1883, Aberforth Dumbledore was born, followed by their daughter Ariana in 1885. By all accounts, the first few years of the Dumbledore family life were happy ones. Percival had a respectable position at the Ministry of Magic in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, while Kendra maintained their home and began the early magical education of their children. But the peaceful existence of the Dumbledore family was shattered in the summer of 1891 when young Ariana, just 6 years old, experienced a trauma that would alter the family's trajectory forever. While playing in the garden, Ariana was spotted performing instinctive magic by a group of Muggle boys from the village. Curious and frightened by what they couldn't understand, they attacked her, demanding to see more magic. The exact details of what occurred have been lost to history, but the aftermath was clear. Ariana was traumatized so severely that her magic became unstable and dangerous. She would never gain proper control of her abilities again. What happened next has been remembered as both a tragedy and a scandal. Consumed by rage and grief, Percival Dumbledore tracked down the Muggle boys responsible and attacked them with magic. Though they survived, Percival's vengeance violated the international statute of secrecy and shocked the wizarding community. Percival never explained his actions during his trial, refusing to reveal the motivation behind his attack. Doing so would have exposed Ariana's condition, potentially leading to her institutionalization at St. Mungo's Hospital. Instead, he accepted the charges and was sentenced to Azkaban prison, where he would remain until his death. With her husband imprisoned and her daughter's condition a dangerous secret, Kendra made the difficult decision to leave Mould-on-the-Wold behind. The whispers and stares had become unbearable. She relocated the family to Godric's Hollow, a village with a mixed Muggle and wizarding population where they could start fresh, unknown to their neighbors. Despite the family tragedy, Albus Dumbledore's magical education continued as planned. In 1892, at age 11, he arrived at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, where he was sorted into Gryffindor House, breaking the family tradition of Ravenclaws. From his first day, it was clear that Albus possessed extraordinary magical talent. Professors noted his ability to master spells on the first attempt, his insatiable intellectual curiosity, and his remarkable memory. As his education progressed, Albus distinguished himself as perhaps the most brilliant student ever to attend Hogwarts. His academic achievements were unprecedented. By his 5th year, Albus had won the Barnabas Finkley Prize for exceptional spellcasting, became the British youth representative to the Wizengamot, and received the gold medal for groundbreaking contribution to the International Alchemical Conference. But what truly set young Albus apart was his innovative approach to magic. Not content to simply master existing spells and potions, he began developing new magical theories and techniques while still a teenager. His paper on trans-species transformation caught the attention of notable magical scholars, including Nicholas Flamel, with whom he would later collaborate. Yet, despite his academic triumphs, Albus's school years were shadowed by his family's situation. Few of his classmates knew about his father's imprisonment or his sister's condition. Albus maintained a friendly but somewhat distant relationship with his peers, perhaps a defense mechanism to avoid difficult questions about his home life. Letters between mother and son during this period reveal Albus's conflicted feelings, pride in his accomplishments at school, concern for Ariana's well-being, and an increasing desire to see the world beyond Britain's shores. Kendra encouraged his academic pursuits while gently reminding him of family responsibilities. By the time Albus graduated from Hogwarts in 1899, he had earned every honor available to a student and was widely regarded as a wizard of extraordinary promise. With offers to join prestigious magical expeditions and invitations to apprentice under celebrated magical masters, the world seemed open to Albus Dumbledore. But fate had other plans. Just as Albus prepared to embark on a grand tour of the magical world with his friend Elphias Doge, tragedy struck the Dumbledore family once again. In the summer of 1899, shortly after Albus's graduation from Hogwarts, Kendra Dumbledore was killed in what was reported as a magical accident. The truth, kept secret for many years, was that Ariana had experienced one of her uncontrollable magical outbursts, with fatal consequences for her mother. The wizarding press reported the tragedy with little detail, respecting the family's privacy, or perhaps reflecting how successfully Kendra had isolated her family from society. At 18 years old, Albus Dumbledore suddenly found himself the head of a broken family. With his father in Azkaban, his mother gone, and his brother Aberforth still at Hogwarts, Albus cancelled his travel plans and returned to Godric's Hollow to care for his vulnerable sister. Friends from school described the dramatic change in the young man from ambitious and outgoing to isolated and resigned. It must have been a bitter pill for the brilliant young wizard to swallow. Instead of exploring magical innovations alongside the greatest minds of the era, he was confined to the small cottage in Godric's Hollow, his days consumed with managing his sister's unpredictable condition. But then, something, or rather, someone unexpected arrived in Godric's Hollow that would change everything. A brilliant young wizard moved into the village to live with his great-aunt, Bathilda Bagshot. His name was Gellert Grindelwald. The relationship between Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald has been the subject of intense speculation for decades. What we know with certainty is that in the summer of 1899, these two extraordinary wizards, perhaps the most talented of their generation, formed an immediate and intense connection. Grindelwald had recently been expelled from Durmstrang Institute for dangerous magical experiments, but his brilliance was undeniable. In Albus, he found an intellectual equal with whom he could discuss his most ambitious ideas. For the isolated Albus, Grindelwald represented excitement, understanding, and a reawakening of his suppressed ambitions. Together, they became obsessed with the legend of the Deathly Hallows, three magical objects said to make their possessor the master of death: the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Cloak of Invisibility. This pursuit wasn't merely academic. Both young men had personal reasons for their interest. Their surviving correspondence reveals plans far more extensive than a simple treasure hunt. They envisioned a new world order, one where wizards would emerge from hiding and establish benevolent rule over muggles. Their slogan, "For the greater good," would later become infamous. How much of this vision originated with Grindelwald and how much with Dumbledore remains debated by magical historians. What's clear is that during those summer weeks, Albus Dumbledore was swept up in revolutionary fervor, his natural caution overwhelmed by Grindelwald's charisma and the intoxication of finding someone who understood his intellectual capacity. Not everyone was enchanted by these grand plans. Aberforth Dumbledore, home from Hogwarts for the summer, confronted his brother about his neglect of Ariana and his dangerous association with Grindelwald. The younger Dumbledore, always more practical and down-to-earth than his brilliant brother, saw clearly the dark path down which Albus was being led. The confrontation between the Dumbledore brothers and Grindelwald escalated into a three-way duel, a chaotic explosion of powerful magic from three talented but emotionally charged young wizards. In the confusion, a spell struck Ariana Dumbledore, killing her instantly. Whose spell caused Ariana's death was never determined. Grindelwald fled immediately, returning to continental Europe to begin his rise to power. The Dumbledore brothers, devastated by guilt and grief, buried their sister beside their mother in Godric's Hollow Cemetery. At the funeral, Aberforth's grief and rage exploded. He physically attacked his brother, breaking Albus's nose, and a physical scar that would match the deeper emotional wounds of that terrible summer. The brothers' relationship would never fully recover. In the aftermath of Ariana's death, the Dumbledore brothers took radically different paths. Aberforth returned to Hogwarts to complete his education, then pursued a quiet life as the proprietor of the Hog's Head Inn in Hogsmeade Village. Though not unintelligent, Aberforth chose a simple existence far removed from the complexities that had destroyed his family. Albus, carrying the weight of guilt and disillusionment, turned away from his earlier ambitions of political influence. He accepted a teaching position at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, becoming the Transfiguration Professor in 1914. Many who knew him during this period described a profound change. The fiery ambition replaced by measured wisdom, the revolutionary fervor transformed into a deep commitment to education. Meanwhile, across Europe, Gellert Grindelwald was putting their once shared ideas into terrible action. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, Grindelwald gathered followers and built a power base, particularly in Eastern Europe. His skillful manipulation of Muggle conflicts, including the rising tensions that would lead to World War II, created perfect cover for his activities. As Grindelwald's power grew, many in the wizarding world looked to Albus Dumbledore, known to be his intellectual equal, to intervene, yet for years Dumbledore resisted direct confrontation with his former friend. For decades, the reason for Dumbledore's hesitation remained a mystery. We now know that beyond emotional entanglement, there existed a blood pact between the young men, a magical bond that prevented them from moving against each other directly. This pact, eventually broken by Dumbledore through means not fully disclosed, represented the final vestige of that fateful summer of 1899. While Grindelwald terrorized Europe, Albus Dumbledore established himself as an extraordinary educator at Hogwarts. Former students from this period consistently describe him as inspiring, perceptive, and fair, though maintaining a certain emotional distance. Many notable wizards and witches of the mid-20th century credit Dumbledore with recognizing and nurturing their talents. His teaching methods were unconventional but effective, emphasizing practical application over rote memorization and encouraging students to understand the ethical implications of magic. Despite focusing on teaching, Dumbledore continued his magical research, publishing groundbreaking papers on dragon blood uses, alchemy, and magical theory. His collaboration with Nicholas Flamel, the only known creator of the Philosopher's Stone, produced significant advancements in alchemical understanding. School records show Dumbledore took special interest in students from troubled backgrounds or those struggling with their magical gifts. Perhaps seeing reflections of his own family's struggles, he demonstrated remarkable perception in identifying children in need of guidance. One such student was Tom Riddle, who arrived at Hogwarts in 1938. From their first meeting at Wool's orphanage, Dumbledore sensed something unusual about the boy who would later become Lord Voldemort. Though he gave Riddle the same opportunities afforded to other students, Dumbledore maintained a watchful vigilance that his colleagues sometimes mistook for unwarranted suspicion. By the 1940s, Albus Dumbledore had transformed from the brilliant but reckless youth of Godric's Hollow into a respected educator and magical innovator. But the shadows of his past were about to catch up with him as Grindelwald's reign of terror reached its peak. The 1945 was a pivotal year in both Muggle and magical history. As Muggle forces finally overcame the Axis powers in World War II, the wizarding world faced its own final confrontation with darkness. Gellert Grindelwald's power had reached its zenith. From his fortress of Nurmengard, he controlled much of wizarding Europe through fear, powerful enchantments, and a network of devoted followers. Despite repeated calls for his intervention, Albus Dumbledore had limited his opposition to strategic advice and support for resistance movements. Public pressure on Dumbledore intensified as Grindelwald's forces pushed westward. Magical newspapers openly questioned his courage, with some darker voices insinuating collusion. What the public didn't know was that Dumbledore was working to break the magical bond that prevented direct confrontation. The details of how Dumbledore finally overcame the Blood Pact remain mysterious. What we do know is that in May of 1945, Albus Dumbledore finally confronted Gellert Grindelwald in what survivors described as the most extraordinary display of magical combat ever witnessed. For 3 hours, the two greatest wizards of their age battled with spells of such complexity and power that the very fabric of reality seemed to warp around them. Witnesses reported seeing magical phenomena never recorded before or since: fire that froze, water that burned, and spells that seemed to tear holes in the air itself. When the magical dust settled, Albus Dumbledore stood victorious, having defeated Grindelwald without taking his life. The defeated dark wizard was imprisoned in his own fortress of Nurmengard, where he would remain until his death decades later. Dumbledore returned to Britain a reluctant hero, though offered the position of Minister for Magic repeatedly in the aftermath of his victory. He declined each time, choosing to return to his position at Hogwarts. Whether this reflected humility or a deep distrust of his own relationship with power remains one of the most debated aspects of Dumbledore's character. In 1956, following the retirement of Armando Dippet, Albus Dumbledore became headmaster of the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, a position he would hold for over 40 years. Under his leadership, Hogwarts entered what many consider its golden age. As headmaster, Dumbledore instituted progressive reforms, expanding the curriculum and championing inclusive policies for students of all backgrounds. Muggle studies became a more prominent subject, emphasizing understanding rather than mere observation. Dumbledore also relaxed some of the more archaic school traditions while strengthening those that fostered house unity and school pride. Former faculty members described Dumbledore's leadership style as collaborative yet decisive. He granted his teachers considerable autonomy while maintaining clear expectations about student welfare and educational quality. Even his eccentric habits, like announcing random words as passwords or offering unusual sweets, served strategic purposes, putting visitors off balance or creating an atmosphere where conventional thinking could be challenged. During these years, Dumbledore's office became famous for its collection of mysterious silver instruments, many of his own design. Though their purposes remained known only to him, historians believe they monitored various magical phenomena, particularly those related to dark magic and protective enchantments. Beyond Hogwarts, Dumbledore maintained an extensive network of contacts throughout the magical world. His influence at the International Confederation of Wizards, where he eventually became Supreme Mugwump, allowed him to shape global magical cooperation. These connections would prove crucial when a new dark threat emerged from an unexpected source. By the late 1960s, Albus Dumbledore was at the height of his influence and reputation. Having defeated Grindelwald, revolutionized magical education, and contributed landmark research in multiple fields, he was widely regarded as the greatest wizard of modern times. But while Dumbledore guided Hogwarts, his former student, Tom Riddle, now calling himself Lord Voldemort, was quietly gathering power. Having transformed himself through dark magic, Voldemort began assembling followers known as Death Eaters, many drawn from ancient pure-blood families who resented the increasing integration of Muggle-borns into wizarding society. As unexplained disappearances and strange occurrences increased, Dumbledore was among the first to recognize the pattern. Unlike the Ministry of Magic, which was slow to acknowledge the emerging threat, Dumbledore began preparing for conflict. In 1970, Dumbledore founded the Order of the Phoenix, a secret organization dedicated to opposing Voldemort and his followers. Drawing on trusted former students, colleagues, and allies, the Order operated independently from the sometimes compromised ministry structures. The conflict that followed, now known as the First Wizarding War, tested Dumbledore's leadership in new ways. No longer facing a single powerful opponent as he had with Grindelwald, Dumbledore now coordinated resistance against a dispersed network of dark wizards who used terror, infiltration, and the Imperious Curse to destabilize Wizarding Britain. In the midst of this conflict, a prophecy was made that would alter the course of magical history. In early 1980, during an interview with a divination teacher candidate at the Hog's Head Inn, Sybil Trelawney delivered a genuine prophecy about a child with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. The prophecy, partially overheard by a Death Eater spy, set in motion a chain of events that would lead Voldemort to the Potter home in Godric's Hollow on Halloween night 1981. There, attempting to prevent the prophecy's fulfillment, Voldemort murdered James and Lily Potter, but failed to kill their infant son, Harry. The killing curse rebounded, destroying Voldemort's physical form and ending the First Wizarding War. In the aftermath of Voldemort's defeat, Albus Dumbledore made a decision that would be questioned for years to come. Rather than placing the orphaned Harry Potter with a wizarding family, Dumbledore delivered him to the home of his Muggle relatives, the Dursleys. This choice, seemingly at odds with Harry's well-being, given the Dursleys' known aversion to magic, was driven by Dumbledore's understanding of ancient protective magic. Lily Potter's sacrifice had created a powerful blood protection that could be maintained only while Harry called home a place where his mother's blood dwelled, in this case with his maternal Aunt Petunia. During the years of relative peace that followed, Dumbledore balanced his duties as Hogwarts headmaster with vigilant monitoring of signs that Voldemort might return. Though the wizarding world celebrated the Dark Lord's defeat as permanent, Dumbledore recognized subtle indications that Voldemort's spirit endured in a weakened state. Preparation for Voldemort's potential return included securing dangerous magical objects like the Philosopher's Stone and strengthening Hogwarts' defenses. Dumbledore also maintained contact with former Order members, ensuring they could be quickly mobilized if needed. When Harry Potter finally arrived at Hogwarts in 1991, Dumbledore observed him with particular interest. Though he maintained a certain distance, aware that too close an association might endanger the boy, Dumbledore quietly guided Harry's development, sometimes through direct intervention, but often through carefully orchestrated circumstances that tested and strengthened the young wizard's character. The confirmation of Voldemort's continued existence came sooner than expected. In Harry's first year at Hogwarts, Voldemort's spirit attempted to steal the Philosopher's Stone in his second year, a memory preserved in an enchanted diary, later recognized by Dumbledore as a Horcrux, nearly succeeded in physically returning through possession of a student. These incidents convinced Dumbledore that Voldemort had utilized particularly dark magic to anchor his soul to the mortal world. Thus began one of Dumbledore's most complex and secretive projects, identifying and understanding Voldemort's Horcruxes. Throughout the 1990s, as evidence of Voldemort's potential return accumulated, Albus Dumbledore's relationship with the Ministry of Magic became increasingly strained. Minister Cornelius Fudge, initially deferential to Dumbledore's wisdom, grew resentful of the headmaster's reputation and influence. This tension exploded into open conflict following the Triwizard Tournament of 1995, when Harry Potter witnessed Voldemort's bodily return. Fudge, fearing political repercussions, refused to acknowledge this reality and began a campaign to discredit both Dumbledore and Harry. During this period, Dumbledore was removed from his positions at the International Confederation of Wizards and the Wizengamot. Though these political maneuvers clearly frustrated him, Dumbledore maintained his characteristic calm, focusing instead on reorganizing the Order of the Phoenix and preparing for the conflict he knew was inevitable. The Ministry's interference reached Hogwarts itself with the appointment of Dolores Umbridge as High Inquisitor and briefly Headmistress. Dumbledore's temporary removal from the school represented one of the few times his strategic patience gave way to direct action, as he dramatically escaped arrest rather than submitting to ministry authority. Vindication came at a terrible price. The Battle of the Department of Mysteries in June 1996 forced the Ministry to acknowledge Voldemort's return when the Dark Lord appeared in the Ministry itself. Though restored to his positions of influence, Dumbledore now faced a wizarding community that had lost a critical year of preparation due to official denial. In the summer of 1996, Albus Dumbledore made a catastrophic error, one that would ultimately cost him his life. While investigating Voldemort's Horcruxes, he discovered the Gaunt family ring, which contained the Resurrection Stone, one of the legendary Deathly Hallows he had sought in his youth. Whether overcome by temptation to use the stone to speak with his lost family members, or simply momentarily careless, Dumbledore placed the ring on his finger, activating a powerful curse laid by Voldemort. Though Dumbledore contained the curse to his hand with help from Severus Snape, the magic was too powerful to be completely counteracted. The greatest wizard of the age had perhaps a year to live. Faced with his mortality, Dumbledore accelerated his plans. He began private lessons with Harry Potter, sharing carefully selected memories about Voldemort's past and the nature of Horcruxes. Simultaneously, he entrusted Severus Snape with crucial information to be revealed to Harry at the proper moment. Complicating matters further, Dumbledore learned of Voldemort's plan to have Draco Malfoy assassinate him, a seemingly cruel assignment designed more to punish Draco's father than to actually succeed. Unwilling to see the boy's soul damaged by committing murder, Dumbledore and Snape reached a shocking agreement. When the moment came, Snape would kill Dumbledore himself, both sparing Draco and cementing Snape's position in Voldemort's inner circle. That moment arrived on the Astronomy Tower of Hogwarts in June 1997. Weakened by a potion he had consumed to retrieve another Horcrux, Dumbledore faced a group of Death Eaters and a hesitant Draco Malfoy. True to their plan, Severus Snape delivered the killing curse that ended Albus Dumbledore's remarkable life. The wizarding world mourned the loss of its greatest defender at a time when darkness was rapidly encroaching. Few understood that Dumbledore's death, like so much of his life, was part of a meticulously constructed plan that would continue to unfold long after he was gone. In the aftermath of Dumbledore's death, his reputation underwent dramatic shifts. Initially revered as a martyr, his image was systematically attacked by the Voldemort-controlled ministry through propaganda and the publication of Rita Skeeter's sensationalistic biography, The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore. Skeeter's book, while exaggerating and distorting many details, brought to light aspects of Dumbledore's early life that he had kept carefully hidden, particularly his friendship with Grindelwald and their shared ambitions. For many who had idolized Dumbledore, these revelations were deeply disillusioning. Aberforth Dumbledore, still tending bar at the Hog's Head after all these years, provided Harry Potter with a perspective on his brother that few had heard, one colored by decades of unresolved grief and resentment, yet containing important truths about Albus's flaws and regrets. Yet even after death, Dumbledore's influence continued through the tasks and tools he had left behind. The infamous Deluminator, the children's book containing Hallow's clues, the inherited sword of Gryffindor, each played critical roles in Harry's ultimate triumph over Voldemort. In what Harry Potter later described as a near-death experience following Voldemort's attack in the Forbidden Forest, Dumbledore appeared one final time to his student, offering explanations, apologies, and encouragement. Whether this encounter occurred in Harry's mind or in some spiritual realm remains one of many Dumbledore mysteries. Ultimately, Dumbledore's complex years-long strategy culminated in Voldemort's final defeat during the Battle of Hogwarts in May 1998. Though not physically present, his planning and foresight proved decisive in the conflict's outcome. As we've journeyed through the extraordinary life of Albus Dumbledore, we've encountered many versions of the man: brilliant student, grieving brother, magical innovator, legendary duelist, beloved teacher, master strategist, and flawed human being. Each perspective reveals different facets of perhaps the most complex wizard in recent history. To his students, Dumbledore was the twinkling-eyed, eccentric headmaster who offered wisdom wrapped in whimsy, a man whose apparent randomness masked careful purpose. To his colleagues, he was a supportive leader who encouraged innovation while maintaining the highest standards. To his enemies, he represented an insurmountable obstacle, the only wizard Voldemort ever feared. To Harry Potter, Dumbledore's relationship was more complicated: mentor, protector, occasional manipulator, and ultimately a figure who trusted him with the fate of the wizarding world. As Harry matured, his understanding of Dumbledore evolved from childlike admiration to adult recognition of both greatness and fallibility. The question of how much Dumbledore truly revealed of himself remains open to debate. Even his closest associates describe moments of profound privacy, times when the headmaster seemed miles away, lost in thoughts he shared with no one. What regrets haunted him in those quiet moments? What memories brought him joy? These mysteries remain largely his own. No exploration of the Dumbledore family would be complete without deeper consideration of Aberforth, the brother who lived in Albus's shadow, yet played crucial roles in both wizarding wars. Unlike his academically brilliant brother, Aberforth found his calling in simpler pursuits. Even as a boy, he showed remarkable affinity for animals, particularly goats, a connection that would later become fodder for unsavory rumors and jokes. But those who knew him well recognized a different kind of intelligence, one grounded in practical reality rather than abstract theory. Though he cultivated a gruff, misanthropic persona as the barkeeper of the Hog's Head Inn, Aberforth demonstrated extraordinary courage during both wizarding wars. As a member of the original Order of the Phoenix, he fought alongside his brother against Voldemort's first rise. During the Second Wizarding War, his establishment served as a critical way station for the Resistance, and he personally saved several lives during the Battle of Hogwarts. Perhaps most significantly, it was Aberforth who provided the lifeline that sustained Dumbledore's army during the Carrow's Reign of Terror. At Hogwarts, the secret passage through which food and supplies reached the students hiding in the Room of Requirement. The fragment of magical mirror that Aberforth used to watch over Harry Potter revealed a depth of commitment that belied his curmudgeonly exterior. Though he claimed to have lost faith in his brother's grand schemes, Aberforth ultimately honored Albus's legacy in his own practical, unassuming way. After Voldemort's defeat, Aberforth continued his quiet life at the Hog's Head. Unlike his brother, he never sought recognition or power, content with the simple satisfaction of independence and the occasional company of those few he considered friends. In many ways, Aberforth's story serves as a counterpoint to his brothers and Bernardi, a reminder that greatness manifests in different forms and that sometimes the most heroic actions are those that never make the history books. Perhaps the most tragic figure in the Dumbledore saga is also its most mysterious. Ariana, the youngest Dumbledore, whose brief life was marked by trauma and whose death shaped her brother's destinies. Little is known about Ariana before the attack that changed her life. Family accounts describe a lively, magical child with particular delight in nature and small creatures. The portrait that later hung in Aberforth's home shows a sweet-faced girl surrounded by butterflies, perhaps a memory of happier times. The exact nature of Ariana's condition following her trauma has been the subject of much speculation. Modern magical healers have suggested various diagnoses, from magical PTSD to a condition known as an obscurus, where suppressed magic becomes volatile and dangerous. Whatever the precise explanation, the effect on the young girl was profound, leaving her unable to control her magical abilities and subject to unpredictable outbursts. Kendra Dumbledore devoted herself to Ariana's care, creating a protected environment where her daughter could live with dignity despite her challenges. After Kendra's death, this responsibility fell primarily to Aberforth, who showed remarkable patience and compassion toward his sister. The circumstances of Ariana's death, caught in magical crossfire during the confrontation between her brothers and Grindelwald, represent the tragic culmination of a life defined by the actions of others. Yet her legacy lives on, not just in the lasting impact on her brothers, but in how her story illuminates the human cost of both anti-Muggle prejudice and unchecked magical ambition. Some magical theorists have speculated that Ariana's condition may have granted her unusual magical perception, perhaps explaining how her portrait later served as a passage between Hogwarts and the Hog's Head during the school's darkest hour. If true, it suggests that even in tragedy, Ariana Dumbledore ultimately found a way to contribute to the protection of others. While our focus has been on the central Dumbledore family drama, it's worth noting that the family tree extends beyond these principal figures. Percival Dumbledore came from a respected, if not famous, wizarding lineage. Records indicate cousins and distant relatives throughout Britain, though most maintained lower profiles than their illustrious relation. After Percival's imprisonment, many of these family connections distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with scandal. On Kendra's side, family connections are more obscure, given her Muggle-born status. Interestingly, the family did have a notable connection through marriage. Bathilda Bagshot, the renowned magical historian, was Gellert Grindelwald's great-aunt, creating an inadvertent link between the Dumbledores and the very wizard who would play such a pivotal role in their tragedy. In later years, as Albus Dumbledore's fame grew, distant relatives occasionally emerged claiming connection to the renowned wizard. Most such claims were tenuous at best, though Dumbledore himself was known to send Christmas cards to several distant cousins despite having little personal contact with them. The lack of a direct Dumbledore descendants, with neither Albus nor Aberforth having children, meant that the main family line effectively ended with them, yet their influence continues to reverberate through wizarding history, affecting generations who never knew them personally. Despite the extensive historical record of Albus Dumbledore's life, significant mysteries remain, some by his design, others by circumstance. Even now, decades after his death, magical scholars continue to uncover new aspects of his complex legacy. Dumbledore's numerous magical innovations remain incompletely understood. His modifications to the Deluminator, the enchantments on the Mirror of Erised, and dozens of other magical devices incorporate principles that continue to challenge even the most accomplished magical theorists. Some speculate that Dumbledore deliberately left certain aspects of his work enigmatic, and perhaps believing that some knowledge should be rediscovered rather than inherited. The full content of Dumbledore's final conversation with Grindelwald, which took place shortly before Dumbledore's death, has never been revealed. What was discussed between these former friends turned adversaries? Was it merely an attempt to locate the Elder Wand, or did their conversation touch on deeper matters of their shared history? Dumbledore's extensive travels during school holidays and his sabbatical year of 1945-1946 remain sparsely documented. Magical communities from Tibet to Peru report visits from the wizard, but what he sought or learned in these far-flung locations is largely unknown. Perhaps most intriguing are the rumors of Dumbledore's personal journals purported to exist but never found after his death. If authentic, these writings might finally provide insight into the inner thoughts of a man who, despite his warm exterior, kept much of his true self carefully guarded. As we conclude our journey through the extraordinary story of the Dumbledore family, we return to where much of it unfolded: Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Today, Albus Dumbledore's portrait hangs in the headmaster's office, occasionally offering wisdom to current school leadership, while his name adorns everything from scholarships to a chocolate frog card. Those who knew him personally, especially members of Dumbledore's army and the Order of the Phoenix, have ensured that his philosophical approach to magic continues. The emphasis on magical cooperation, ethical use of power, and the importance of choices over abilities has influenced a generation of young witches and wizards. The wizarding world's governmental structures bear his influence as well. Reforms in the treatment of magical creatures, cooperation with Muggle authorities, and international magical cooperation all reflect principles Dumbledore championed throughout his life. In a more personal tribute, the Ariana Dumbledore Memorial Foundation now provides support for young witches and wizards struggling with magical control, ensuring that no child faces the isolation and fear that defined Ariana's brief life. With Aberforth's passing in 2019 at the age of 136, the direct Dumbledore line came to an end. His simple memorial service, attended by a surprising number of former students and Resistance members, reflected the quiet respect he had earned despite his deliberate avoidance of the spotlight. The story of the Dumbledores is, in many ways, the story of the modern wizarding world itself. A tale of brilliant potential, terrible choices, redemptive sacrifice, and enduring hope. From the heights of magical accomplishment to the depths of personal tragedy, their experiences illuminate the central truth that Albus Dumbledore himself often emphasized: that magic, for all its wonder, is ultimately defined by the hearts and intentions of those who wield it. Well, magical friends, we've journeyed through over a century of wizarding history, exploring the triumphs and tragedies of one of the most fascinating families in the magical world. From Mould-on-the-Wold to Godric's Hollow, from Hogwarts to Nurmengard, we've traced the extraordinary impact of three siblings whose lives were defined by both exceptional gifts and profound loss. Percival's sacrifice to protect his daughter, Kendra's determination to create a safe haven, Albus's brilliance and eventual wisdom, Aberforth's steadfast loyalty, and Ariana's tragic fate that bound them all together. Each member of the Dumbledore family contributed to a legacy that continues to shape wizarding society today. Perhaps the most powerful lesson of the Dumbledore saga is one that Albus himself emphasized throughout his teachings, that our choices reveal more about us than our abilities. The Dumbledores were blessed, or perhaps burdened, with extraordinary magical power. Yet their most significant moments were defined not by displays of magical prowess, but by deeply human choices about love, responsibility, and redemption. So what do you think? Which aspect of the Dumbledore family history surprises you most? Are you Team Albus or Team Aberforth? And what mysteries do you think remain unsolved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to cast your subscription spell by clicking that subscribe button and ringing the notification bell. If you enjoyed this magical journey, give this video a thumbs up and let me know which wizarding family you'd like me to explore next. Until our next magical adventure, remember Dumbledore's wisdom: happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one only remembers to turn on the light. Stay magical, friends.